Hello everyone, and welcome to the Springans Time Thief guide. Now this is my favorite deck of late, and probably my favorite deck of all time, due to its controlling, grinding, but diverse and dynamic playstyle that allows you to play lots of different types of cards, from XZs to traps, links, even a fusion. Now this deck is a rogue deck, meaning that you will lose a few games, but it's easy to learn and pretty hard to master, making the progression of learning it quite fun. Now, the strategy is 3 parts. It has a Time Thief package, a Spriggan package, and then lastly the staples that complement or supplement the strategy as you need. The deck also has several strengths. It's very durable, especially to destruction effects, and makes it very hard for your opponent to kill you. It's very recursive and allows you to recycle resources over the course of turns. It also has lots of searchers in the deck, making your non-one card starters a little bit less intimidating as you're able to find whatever you need. It also has varied forms of interruption, from hard destruction to monster effect negation, spell and trap negation, or just sending to the top of the deck. Lastly, it also has very flexible opening combos, meaning you can make whatever you want out of what you get. However, being a rogue deck, it also has quite a few weaknesses. The starting board isn't too threatening for a going first deck. The Springans combos are all true 2-card combos, meaning that you need the field spell, Great Sand Sea Gold Golgonda, as well as a Spriggan name in your hand. And this means that despite the number of searchers, the deck does experience some inconsistency issues at times. Next, there are very few in-engine negations, as we explored in the first weakness, in that the deck itself, especially the Springans, don't provide many negations. Next, the deck is weak against hard negations and kaiju-like effects that immediately tribute cards for cost, as the deck itself is very good at avoiding destruction effects, but not so much things that nip the deck at the bud. Lastly, the deck is very bad against mass monster effect nullifications, as most of the utility in the deck comes from monster effects. So in conclusion, my goal in making this guide isn't necessarily to do one particular thing. I don't want to just make a copy and paste deck profile or a super theoretical guide on the deck, but provide the viewer as much or as little information as they need or want. To put it another way, I want to take the time that I've invested and then channel it into a super efficient stream of information that the user can take as much or as little from. I hope you enjoy the guide, and let's get on to the quick deck profile. Alright, so let's head into the full deck profile. We'll start off with the Time Thief cards. So starting off, we'll talk about the Time Thief concept, which is that you really only need the Time Thief cards to enable your Time Thief Regulator, which is your only 1-card starter in the deck. And in order to do so, we only play the absolute cream of the Time Thief crop, meaning that we keep a limited Time Thief package so that we can have enough room for our Spriggan cards to keep our consistency of Spriggan draws. So starting off, we'll start with 3 Time Thief Winder. Now you only need 1 of this card really in order to enable your Time Thief Retrograde, your Time Thief Regulator, but you really want to play 3 of it because in addition to being your best target for Time Thief Regulator, it is also a great extender in the deck. So take, for example, you have the situation where you have your Spriggan field spell in your hand, as well as a Springans name. You use the field spell's effect, discarding the Springan name, special summoning Merrymaker. Merrymaker will then send the Springans monster from your deck to the graveyard. That Springans monster will then use its effect to attach itself to the Springans Merrymaker. Then Time Thief Winder in your hand will use its first effect to special summon itself, and then its second effect will trigger, allowing you to add something like Time Thief Retrograde to your hand. You normal summon another level 4 monster, and boom! You have Time Thief Redoer, a Springans Xyz monster, and Time Thief Retrograde on your field, with really just Winder and another random level 4 as your extender. So this card is really strong extender in the deck. It can really help enable your plays, and that's why we definitely play it as a 3 of in the deck. Next, we play 3 Time Thief Regulator. So the dog is really your only 1 card starter in the deck. It serves its primary purpose as getting your Time Thief engine running. It enables you to get your Time Thief Winder and Time Thief Adjuster effects, adding Time Thief cards to your hand and sending your Bezel ship to the graveyard. Its secondary effect to special summon itself from the graveyard when an Xyz monster you control is destroyed by battle isn't that important, but it can be a little useful at times. But this is just your 1 card starter in the deck. You always want to see it in your opening hand. Even if you see more than 1, at least you saw 1, so it's really strong. This paired with all your other Springans cards is a super strong play, so definitely play 3 of this in your deck. Next, we play 1 Time Thief Adjuster. Time Thief Adjuster, on paper, looks like Time Thief Winder, but unfortunately, it has that nasty little, you can only use 1 of these effects once per turn. So you can't actually use its effect to special summon itself, and its effect to send the Time Thief card to the graveyard. However, say you summon it off of Time Thief Regulator, you can then send your Time Thief Bezel ship to the graveyard, and your Bezel ship is your main extender. But because this card gets really clunky if there's more of 1 of it in your hand, and there's not that many targets you really want to send to your graveyard, Time Thief wise at least, this card only needs to really be at a 1 of. You could play more if you wanted, but a 1 of is sufficient in my eyes. Next we play your 1 Time Thief Bezel ship. Once again, it's another 1 of, because while it is your main value tool in the deck, as it is able to special summon itself from the graveyard by detaching a material from an Xyz monster you control, which of course is very easy with Springans, you only really need 1 of this card because it is all hard once per turn effects, and you really don't want to draw it. In addition, there's so many great ways to send it to the graveyard, like your Time Thief Perpetua, indirectly by attaching it as an Xyz material, or your Time Thief Adjuster. So this card has a super strong set of effects, but you only need 1 of it in your deck. Its primary effect, so the top effect that allows you to attach a card from your opponent's graveyard to a Time Thief Xyz monster you control, is really strong in order to attach a spell or trap card to Time Thief Redoer, but it is not quite as important as its second effect, which allows you to really extend into more rank 4 plays. Next, we play 1 Time Thief Chronocorder. Time Thief Chronocorder is the weakest of the Time Thief monsters in the deck, but it has a good natural synergy with your other monsters. So, let me elaborate. Its first effect basically prevents you from getting OTK'd on your opponent's turn, because a lot of your monsters banish themselves, so this card can sometimes save you in order to not get OTK'd. So say your Springans Merrymaker banishes itself on your opponent's turn to activate its effect, this can come back from the graveyard and then save you an extra, bout of damage. In addition, this is a nice target to send to the graveyard or attach to your other Xyz monsters via your Time Thief effects, if you've already sent Bezel ship. So, this is kind of an optional card in the deck, but I found there's enough times where you really wish you had it that including this 1 of is really worth it. Next, we play 2 Time Thief Retrograde. So, first, let's get out of the way that you need at least 2 Time Thief spell or trap cards in the deck. The reason being that you need 1 to add via your Time Thief Winder's effect, and you need another so that you can attach 1 spell or trap card from your deck to your Time Thief Reader via Time Thief Perpetua's effect. So you need at least 2. Which 2 is up for debate, but in my opinion, Retrograde is just so much better than the other Time Thief spell or trap cards, especially in a deck that's not very heavy on Time Thief cards. So Retrograde has a really nice effect, especially in conjunction with Time Thief Redoer, and then when a spell or trap card is activated, you can negate that effect and then attach it to your Time Thief XZ's monster. So, you control Time Thief Redoer, you negate one of their spell or trap cards, and then you attach that spell or trap card to your Redoer, which gives your Redoer its powerful effect. So this card's a really nasty card. If you draw it, you're perfectly okay with it in most situations, as you can make Time Thief Redoer in basically every hand you have. So this card's just extremely strong and much better than the other Time Thief cards in my opinion, which is why we play 2 of it. Lastly, we play 3 of the Phantom Knights of Shade Brigandine. So this Honorary Time Thief card, I know it's in the Time Thief section even though it's not a Time Thief card, is super potent because it has 2 unique attributes, at least compared to a lot of other cards in the game. The first is you can play it as soon as you set it on your turn, as long as you don't have other trap cards in your graveyard. So this is a great turn 1 play. The second effect is that it's not treated as a trap card, so you can actually make it into an XC's rank 4 monster. This means this is great material for your Time Thief Redoer, as you can use this card to make your Time Thief Redoer and automatically have that nice non-targeted return to the top of the deck effect on your opponent's turn. So this card is played at 3 of because it has 2 main qualities I'm looking for when I am considering how many cards to play, or at least how many copies of a card to play in a deck. Number 1, does it make your good hands even better? I.e., is it an important component that makes your hands even better than they already were? And that's a yes. And number 2, and more importantly, does it make your bad hands good? So that is also a yes, because in this deck, your bad hands generally consist of a bunch of level 4 monsters that you can't actually use to get a rank 4 monster, and this solves that problem. If you draw this with a bunch of level 4 monsters, boom, you get that instant Redoer, which then can enable your things like Time Thief Winder, etc., etc., etc. So this is a super strong card to play, and I definitely think you should play 3 of it in the deck. Now that's it for the Time Thief cards. Now we will go on to the Springans cards. So all the Springans monsters have this little effect at the end that says, if this card is in your hand, field, or graveyard, you can target one Springans XC's monster you control, attach this card to it as material. And so I'm not going to go over it again for each Springans monster, but basically this enables you to turn after turn attach a Springans card from your graveyard to your Springans XC's monsters every single turn and give them material to do what they want to do. Now Springans Brothers, we only play 2 of in the deck, despite its really powerful primary effect, which is that if this card is sent from the hand or deck to the graveyard, you can target one Springans monster in your graveyard except Springans Brothers, special summon it in defense position. So it kind of bears resemblances to Time Thief Bezel Ship. You know, if you get it in the graveyard, it does really good things for you, and it allows you to extend your plays out. Now, Springans Brothers, despite this really strong effect, you really don't want to play 3 of it in your deck. In fact, I wouldn't want to play 2 of it in your deck, except there's just such a limited number of Springans cards in the game that are good to play. So the reason being is that if you get this card in your hand and you have to send it off of the field spell, it's really bad because you can't actually send another Springans Brothers from your deck to the graveyard to get it out, because you can't get itself out with its own effect. So basically you want to see any other Springans card in your hand. But we play 2 of it because if you do get one in your hand, you really need to have that one in your deck so that if you have another Springans monster in your hand that's not Brothers, you can get that out of your graveyard. So that's why we play 2 of it and not 3 and not 1. Next we play 3 of Springans Rockey. So this is the Springans monster you most want to see in your opening hand. Its unique effect is that if it is normal or special summon, you can target one Great Sandsea Gold Golgonda, or more importantly, one Springans monster in your graveyard except Springans Rockey and add it to your hand. So this can help recycle resources. So think of this with your Springans Brothers. So Brothers' effect was that you could special summon back a Springans monster from the graveyard. So if you, say, have this in your opening hand, you send it to the graveyard with the field spell in order to get a Springans Xyz monster. Then you use your Springans Merrymaker's effect to send your Springans Brothers to the graveyard. Then that will get out your Springans Rockey. Rockey's effect will activate to add back the Springans Brothers to your hand, and then that Brothers will stick in your hand in order to do the exact same thing all over again next turn. So Springans Rockey is very good to see in your opening hand, and it's the best Springans monster to see in your opening hand, which is why we definitely play 3 of it. Now, we also play 3 Springans Pedor. You can see how much I enjoy seeing level 4 monsters in my opening hand. As Pedor's unique effect is that you can tribute this card from the special summon with Springans monster in your graveyard and special summon it. So really not that great, as none of your Springans monsters really benefit from being special summoned from the graveyard. But Springans Pedor is a level 4 Springans name that is not Springans Brothers, meaning that if you have this card in your opening hand with the field spell, you can still get it out of the graveyard with Springans Brothers once Springans Brothers is sent to the graveyard via Springans Merrymaker's effect. And that is why we play 3 of it. That is pretty much the only reason why. You play this as opposed to the level 8 Springans cards, because you are able to get this card to be normal summoned. And utilizing your normal summon is rather important in this deck, as you don't inherently need to use it in order to activate your Springans combos. So that's why we play 3 of this card. Next, we play 1 Springans Captain Sargas. So this card is your only level 8 Springans monster you play in the deck. It has 2 unique effects. The first one is that if it's your opponent's turn, quick effect, you can detach 1 material from an Xyz monster you control, then target 1 face-up card on the field and destroy it. And you can only use each of the previous effects of this card once per turn, of course. And then a Springans Xyz monster that has this card as material gains this effect. This card gains 500 attack. So the attack boost is actually more useful than you would think, as, you know, your Springans monsters' attack values are kind of at breakpoints. You know, your Explorer is at 2600 attack with the field spell in the field, so getting over that 3000 barrier is rather important. And its first effect isn't that useful, really. I probably should find ways to utilize it more, but I don't find it that useful most of the time. But it's another Springans name, and you need, in my opinion, at least 4 Springans names in the deck, and this just happens to be the best one. So, yes, we play 1 Springans Captain Sargas. And it looks like we're getting a bit of sun, so I'm going to close the blinds real quick. So let's see. Next, we will play 3 of the Great Sand Sea Golgonda. So now we're getting into the Springans spells. So the Great Sand Sea Golgonda, otherwise known as the most tongue-twister Yu-Gi-Oh card in the game, is the core of the deck. It's the thematic core of the Springans archetype, and it has a bunch of unique effects. So the first one is that all Springans Xyz monsters on the field gain 1000 attack. Great! I wish you could probably play more of it if it wasn't a field spell. I wish it was a continuous spell, because then you could actually make use of your additional copies to make them gain more attack. You can only use each of the following effects once per turn, so if you control no Springans Xyz monsters, you can discard 1 Springans card, special summon 1 Springans Xyz monster from your extra deck. So this is what makes the deck tick. This is the only reason you play the Springans archetype whatsoever, is that you can get free, basically, Xyz monsters out of your extra deck by discarding just a Springans name. Its second effect is that if a face-up Xyz monster you control leaves the field by a card effect, except during the damage step, you can target 1 monster your opponent controls. It cannot attack for the rest of this turn. So this helps to slow your opponent down. But, I mean, this is the core of the deck. If you don't draw this card in your opening hand, it really stinks. And even though seeing additional copies of this card is dead, you need to see this card in your opening hand, which is why we play 3 of it. Next, we play 1 Terraforming, because it is a copy of your field spell. That is all. We play 3 Springans Booty, for the same reason as we play Terraforming. It is another copy, effectively, of your Springans field spell. And it has a similar effect to the field spell, in that if a face-up Xyz monster you control leaves the field by card effect, you can target one effect monster your opponent controls. Neither player can activate that effect monster's effect on the field this turn. So, this effect can help if you need to quickly negate your monster's effects. Not as like, it doesn't negate effects like, on summon effects, but say they have something like Neptibus the Atlantean Prince, then you can negate that kind of effect by quickly banishing your Springans Merrymaker or Springans Explorer, and then negating that monster's effect. So, even if you draw this card in addition to field spell copies, it still has a use, which is why this is definitely a 3 of in the deck. Lastly, and definitely not least, is Springans Watch. So the Watch is the most powerful card in the deck. It is the most flexible card in the deck. It does exactly what I say you want your star cards that you play 3 of to do, and then it makes your good hands better and your bad hands good. It is the only Springans card, unfortunately, that truly acts like both a Springans monster and the field spell, in that if you can add the field spell to your hand, but if the field spell is already on your field, you can add a Springans monster from your deck to your hand, and if you do, send 1 Springans monster from your deck to the graveyard. Like, to get a picture of how good this card is in the deck, you would play this card if it only had one of these effects. You would play this card even if it only had half of its second effect. So this card is absolutely bonkers. You need 3 of it 100%. So yeah, as you can see, a lot of the Springans cards aren't that impressive on paper, but when you can really spit out these Xyz monsters, it really synergizes well with your Time Thief cards. So now let's head into what I call the profit cards, or your supporting cast. So these cards enable and help the rest of your deck operate. So we start off with the PSY package with the 1 PSY-Frame Driver and the 3 PSY-Framegear Gamma. So in case you don't know, Gamma cannot be normal summoned or set. It must be special summoned by a card effect, its own card effect. When your opponent activates a monster effect while you control no monsters, quick effect, you can special summon both this card from your hand and 1 PSY-Frame Driver from your hand, deck, or graveyard. And if you do, negate that activation, and if you do, destroy that monster. During the unfaced banish, all face-up monsters special summoned by this effect. So, this card is a hand trap, and it's also a hand trap that synergizes super well with the deck. So it has a really powerful effect of both negation and destruction of a monster, but it has that caveat that you can't control monsters. But it synergizes really well with something like the dog, right? With the dog, it tributes itself to activate its effect. So if you use the dog's effect and the dog attracts hand traps like no other card, then you can use Gamma to negate that pesky Ash Blossom that was trying to negate your dog's effect. And then you can go into a really powerful play because you get out this and this. So Gamma, in my opinion, is super important for the deck. Another cool use of it that's not super widely known, everyone knows about using it with Time Thief Regulator, at least Time Thief players do. But on your opponent's turn, both your Springans Xyz monsters and your Time Thief Reader banish themselves. So you can actually have a board of 2 Xyz monsters. Your opponent can think they're safe from your Gamma, but then they can both banish themselves, and that can make Gamma live. So it also has that really nice additional usage. Not to mention that this is a psychic, and all of your Time Thief monsters are also psychics, giving it that nice synergy. Next, we play 3 Torrential Tribute. So Torrential Tribute is, this is an open spot in the deck. These are kind of what I think was the last 3 cards in the deck. It is your utility. I think it's one of the best cards that complements your monsters in your deck, and I'll try to explain why. So just like I mentioned with Framegear Gamma, your monsters have the ability to banish themselves, meaning that they can actually dodge Torrential Tribute's effect. So, say your opponent summons a monster, you chain your Time Thief Reader's banishing effect, as well as your Springans Xyz monster's banishing effects. they remove themselves on the field, and you basically get a Raigeki on your opponent's turn, which Prank Kids has shown is pretty strong. Your Draco Future, which you also play in this deck, doesn't really dodge it, but it's unaffected. So this card is just super strong in the deck. You can play whatever you want instead of this. You could play your Ash Blossoms, your Solemn Strikes, whatever you like. But in my opinion, Torrential Tribute is the card to play in this last slot. And I'm pretty much always happy when I see it. So now that does it for the main deck. Let's get into the extra deck. So we start off with 2 Springans Merrymaker. So the Merrymaker is the new addition from Lightning Overdrive. Merrymaker has 2 effects. First, when it's special summoned from the extra deck, you can send a Springans monster from your deck to the graveyard. Usually you want to send your Springans Brothers, but sometimes you just send another Springans card just to get that extra name in the graveyard. And then during your opponent's main or battle phase, you can banish this card until the end phase, and then if you banish this card with 2 or more Xyz materials, you can also send 1 fusion monster from your extra deck to the graveyard. That lists Fallen of Albaz's material. So the card you'll be sending off this is your Sprind the Iron Dash Dragon. So when you use this card, you really only want to use it on your opening turn. But its effect is so important to get the deck going that if it does get negated for some reason, it gets Ash Blossomed or something like that, you sometimes also want to make it on your second turn. So that's why we include 2 of them. You only really want to play it as a 1-of, but you kind of have to play it as a 2-of, because if you don't resolve it and you need to resolve it, you really want that second copy. So next we play 2 Spriggan's Ship Explorer. Or Explorer. Explorer is a rank 8 monster that you can special summon the exact same way via this field spell. And you can choose one of your opponent's monster zones or spell trap zones, detach any number of materials from this card, and then destroy the same number of cards your opponent controls in that chosen zone and its adjacent monster zones or spell trap zones. So basically, you choose a zone, and then it destroys cards adjacent to it equal to the number of materials you detach. Up to 3. And this is a really powerful destruction effect. It can clear your opponent's board in an instant. And it also has the effect, just like your Spriggan's Ship Merrymaker, that it can banish itself during your opponent's turn. So, with your Springans Ship exploit, this is what you generally want to go into post turn 1. After turn 1, you use your Merrymaker effect, you get your Springans names in the graveyard, and then you just want to blow. And by using Springans Ship Explorer, you can start clearing your opponent's board at a very rapid rate. And it's your main kind of power, and really your only power card that has to do with Springans in the entire deck. Next, we play 1 Sprind the Iron Dash Dragon. So this is your fusion monster that lists Fallen of Albaz's material that you will send to the graveyard via Springans Merrymaker's effect. Its only relevant effect is that if this card is in the graveyard because it was sent there this turn during the end phase, you can add to your hand or special summon 1 Springans monster or Fallen of Albaz from your deck. So in this case, we choose to generally special summon your Springans Rockey in order to add back your another Springans card from your graveyard to your hand, generally Springans Brothers. And this is simply in the deck to enable your Springans Merrymaker and your opening turn plays. You only need 1 of it because, once again, if you are resolving Merrymaker more than once on your opponent's turn, you're playing too slowly and you're going to die. So you really only want to resolve this once. So you only need 1 of this in your extra deck. Next on the menu, we have 2 Time Thief Redoer. We've already mentioned this card a lot, especially in the Time Thief section, but Time Thief Redoer has 2 strong effects. First of all, during the standby phase, you can attach the top card of your opponent's deck to this card as a material. And that card is kind of fun, Hearthstone style, kind of random. Then, quick effect, you can detach up to 3 different types of materials from this card, then apply the following effects depending on what was detached. So, monster, banish this card until the end phase. So this kind of can help you avoid destruction effects like your Torrential Tribute or your opponent's actual destruction effects. Spell, you draw 1 card, that's always good. and monster, place one face-up card your opponent controls on top of the deck. So this is kind of like Dingirsu, in that it doesn't destroy or target, it just places. So it's a really powerful non-destruction effect that does what you want it to do. And oftentimes placing a card on top of your opponent's deck is even better than destroying and sending it to the graveyard, because then they can't even use it in the graveyard. So I mean, these effects are bonkers. This is the card that generally your primary Xyz monster you want to make on an open board on your opening turn, and that's why we have 2 of it. Next we play 1 Time Thief Perpetua. Time Thief Perpetua, like Time Thief Reader, costs 2 level 4 monsters to make. And during the standby phase, you can detach 1 material from this card, then target 1 Time Thief monster in your graveyard, except itself, and special summon that monster. So this enables you to get back out, say, your Time Thief Bezel ship, in order to attach another card to your Time Thief Reader, or can get out your Time Thief Winder in order to add another Time Thief card to your hand. So it's a value machine. And its second effect is you can target 1 other Xyz monster you control, attach 1 Time Thief card from your deck to it as material. So this card really is like the Time Thief Reader's, quad core engine or something. It powers up your Reader by attaching, say, Time Thief Retrograde from your deck to it. We mentioned we need that second copy of Retrograde. Well, this is why. You can take that Time Thief Retrograde from your deck, attach that trap card to your Time Thief Reader, enabling it to get that place effect. We only need Time Thief Perpetua at 1 because this is kind of a luxury card that you make in addition to your Time Thief Reader, and you really only make 1, in my opinion at least. Next we play the more utility rank 4 cards. So we play Tornado Dragon, destroy spell and trap cards. Now the important thing about Tornado Dragon and the card that comes after it, Abyss Dweller, is that with these 2 cards, you can instantly activate their effects as soon as they enter the field. So, and this is important for the Utopic Draco Fuchsia I'll talk about later. But basically, when you can activate their effects right away, it means that you don't mind if they get sent to the graveyard or made into Xyz material. You get value right away out of them, and then boom, they're done, and you can simply make them do something else with them. You can detach their other material, you can do whatever you want with them, but you do get value out of them, and they're good utility. Abyss Dweller, this effect is so unique on a generic rank 4 monster. Like, what type of monster in the game has this effect that can completely shut down certain decks? You play this against something like Sky Striker, really disrupts their, Sky Striker, their main Sky Striker Ray, stuff like that. It can completely shut down decks, and it's definitely worth playing in your main deck, in my opinion. Next, we play 1 Divine Arsenal AA Zeus Sky Thunder. So yes, I know this card is a bit expensive, but at the very least, this card, you are getting your bang for your buck in this deck, because I think this card is almost as good as it is in something like Zodiac. And let me expand on this. So we know that once per turn, you can get this by using an Xyz monster you control's material if an Xyz monster battled. So this could be your opponent's Xyz monster battled, your monster battled, not just like your monster battled on your turn. So then you can detach 2 materials on this card, send all the cards from the field to the graveyard. Note that's another non-destruction effect, that's a send effect. And then as the last effect, which doesn't come up too often, that once per turn, if another card you control is destroyed by battle or an opponent's card effect, you can attach 1 card from your hand, deck, or extra deck to this card as material. So Zeus is good for several reasons. Number 1, you can stack materials on it with things like Time Thief Perpetua. So you can accumulate materials on this card and keep accumulating and say with Time Thief Perpetua and give it a lot of materials. Number 2, just like Torrential Tribute, you remember how Torrential Tribute was good because we could banish our own cards to avoid the effect? We can do the same thing here. We can dodge Zeus's effect with our Time Thief Reader and Springans Xyz monsters. So ending on something like Zeus Redoer, Explorer is really powerful and hard to get rid of and really disruptive for your opponent. Number 3, and this is a effect that's also utilized by a Utopic Draco Future, but there is a situation that comes up in this deck a lot where you open on your Springans Merrymaker, you banish it during your opponent's turn, so it lives until your next turn, but then you're stuck with Springans Merrymaker. And what I mean by stuck is that if you remember, the Springans field spell card states that you can only use its special summoning from the extra deck ability if you don't control Springans Xyz monster. So you still have that Merrymaker, and you don't know how to get rid of it productively. You don't tribute it. Who tributes in the year 2021? And you don't really, I mean, it's not a level 4 card, it's a rank 4 card, so you can't really do much with it. What can you do with it? Make it into a Zeus. Attach a bunch of Springans to it, make it into a Zeus with 4 materials, and boom, you can summon your Explorer, and then your Explorer can pop off, in addition to being able to dodge your Zeus's effect on your opponent's turn. So it's just so crazy good. Zeus is such a great card in this deck, and I definitely recommend playing it, especially when it comes out to be a little less expensive in the Megatons in the upcoming month. So the next package you play is the number F0 Utopic Future and number F0 Utopic Draco Future. So Utopic Future doesn't really matter. All that really matters is that it only costs 2 Xyz monsters with the same rank. So for example, 2 of your rank 4 monsters to make it. Now, Utopic Draco Future can be made via your Utopic Future, meaning that effectively Utopic Draco Future, at the cost of an extra deck slot, can be made out of 2 Xyz monsters with the same rank. Now, Utopic Draco Future is a very powerful card. We know it cannot be destroyed by battle card effects, and it has that nice monster effect, negation effect, that not only negates the effect, but also steals the monster, meaning that they can't get any graveyard effects either. So Utopic Draco Future does the same thing that Zeus does as well. You know, it has the capability to remove your Springans Merrymaker and put it to productive use in the afterlife by making it into Xyz material. And so this card is really great to go into on your second turn. Lastly, we have PSY-Frame Lord Omega and PSY-Frame Lord Lambda. So Omega is solely there for the purpose that if you resolve your Framegear Gamma on your turn, you can make that Synchro monster with it. So you can make Frame Lord Omega, say you resolved it to allow your Regulator, your Time Thief Regulator to go off, you can make Omega. And Omega itself, as opposed to other level 8 Synchro monsters, has really great effects. It can also banish itself from the field. So it, along with Redoer and your other Springans Xyz monsters, can avoid your destruction effects, your mass destruction effects like Torrential Tribute and AA Zeus. And it has a nice effect where you can return banished cards to your graveyard, and if it is in the graveyard, you can target one other card in the graveyard and return this card back into the extra deck, which means that you don't need to run other, toolbox level 8 Synchro monsters. This card will keep recurring itself. And lastly, we play the PSY-Frame Lord Lambda. So Lambda is a bit of a strange card. You don't need it in the deck, but I found it's this great capstone toolbox card that enables you to get out of some tight pickles and complement your Omega. So let me present a few situations. First of all, let's say they play something like Contact C, or that one monster that makes you Link Summon. Lambda will enable you to Link Summon or get out of Contact C, and none of the other cards in your extra deck will enable you to do that. Secondly, this can clean up other scraps, like your cards that Utopic Draco Future steals, or things like that. Third of all, this gives you a great option to go with your Time Thief Redoer or your Omega. So, its first effect enables you to activate PSY-Framegear monsters in your hand even while you control monsters, so that's nice. But if a face-up Psychic monster you control is banished face-up while you control this monster, you can activate this effect during the end phase of this turn, add a PSY-Frame card from your deck to your hand. So you can add another Framegear Gamma to your hand during the end phase. So say you have Time Thief Reader, which is a psychic. You can banish itself with this card on the field to add a PSY-Framegear Gamma, and that Gamma will give you a monster effect negation on your opponent's turn, as well as maybe a Retrograde, which will give you the spell of trap negation. So Lambda can be really nice to pair with Time Thief Reader if you have the resources, and I just think this card is a great capstone to the deck overall. And with that said, that'll do it for the entire deck profile. I know it took a little while, but hopefully you not only know what cards are in the deck, but also why they're in the deck and the purpose behind having each one of them. Now let's get into some basic combos that we can use with this deck. I'll be showing 4 combos, each one ascending in, well, complexity and power. So for the first one, we'll just demonstrate the basic Springans interaction. So we will only need a field spell or a card that finds the field spell, like Springans Watch, Terraforming, or Springans Bounty, and a Springans monster. So we will activate the Great Sandsea Gold Golgonda. Then we will send Springans Pedor from our hand to get out a Springans Xyz monster. We will get the Springans Merrymaker. Merrymaker's effect will trigger, allowing us to send a Springans monster from deck to graveyard. Say we just send any, like Springans Captain Sargas, but it could be anyone. We then use both of their effects to attach themselves to an Xyz monster, the Springans one that is. And with this being done, we will end our turn. At least we hopefully wouldn't, but we could just end our turn here. Now on the opponent's turn, we would banish this card when it was, going to be destroyed or at the beginning of the battle phase. This card will be banished. These 2 materials will fall off, and then 2 effects will trigger simultaneously. We will be able to trigger this effect and this effect. This one will prevent an opponent's monster from attacking, and this one will allow us to send a fusion monster from our extra deck to the graveyard that lists Fallen of Albaz in its name. So our Iron Dash Dragon's effect will trigger during the end phase to allow us to special summon a Springans monster, and say during the end phase we then get out something like Springans Brothers. It could be anything. We will then have Merrymaker, and that is a good set of value for the deck, as we will then easily be able to make some other kind of rank 4 play the following turn. So that's the first basic Springans interaction in the deck. Alright, the second combo will be slightly better, but it basically requires the same materials. But instead of just the field spell on any Springans monster, we need the field spell and Springans Rockey or Springans Watch. So it's pretty easy to see how Springans Watch can do well in this deck, but we will do it with Springans Rockey here. So first, we will activate, say, Springans Booty, because this will count as the field spell. We will then send it to the graveyard to activate the field spell directly from our deck, like so. Then we will use the field spell's effect to discard Rockey to get back out our good friend Merrymaker. Merrymaker will trigger, allowing us to send a Springans monster. In this case, we will send Springans Brothers. Now we'll do that nice combo we talked about in the full deck profile. Springans Brothers will trigger, allowing us to special summon back out a Springans monster from the graveyard. We will special summon out Rockey. Rockey's effect will now trigger, allowing us to add a Springans monster from the graveyard to our hand. We will add back Brothers to our hand. And now, while we don't want to normal summon Brothers to the field, we can if we need to. So now we can normal summon Brothers, as we still have not used our normal summon. Then we will overlay these 2 into either one of 2 choices. So we can either go for any rank 4 we want, like, say, Time Thief Reader, or we could go into Time Thief Perpetua And this will enable us to actually attach 2 materials to Springans Merrymaker. So on this turn, we can use its effect to quick effect, attach a Time Thief monster from the deck to this card. So we could attach any Time Thief card. Say we attach just something basic like, you know, our Bezel ship, something that we want to get in the graveyard, to this card. And then during our opponent's, say, early in their turn, their standby phase, we can do the exact same thing to attach another Time Thief card to this card, like the Chronocorder. And that concludes this combo. So out of just 2 cards, you get, you know, the same interaction off Merrymaker. So you could banish this, special summon, or send the fusion monster to the graveyard, and then get that effect. You know, you will have these materials fall off into the graveyard. That Bezel ship will be coming back for future turns, and Perpetua will be able to hopefully keep attaching. So yeah, just by changing it to Springans Rockey or Springans Watch, we get a much better board than we did in the last combo. So let's get into combo number 3. So for this combo, you just need a copy of the field spell, Springans Rockey or Springans Pedor, and Time Thief Winder. So this is the combo's designed to show off Winder's capability to extend your plays, as we just showed what we could do with just these 2 cards. So we will start off by playing Springans Watch, adding the field spell to our hand. We will then play the field spell, use the field spell's effect to discard Springans Rockey in order to special summon our good friend Merrymaker. Merrymaker will then send Springans Brothers to the graveyard. Springans Brothers will activate its effect, special summoning Springans Rockey in the fence position. Springans Rockey will then activate its effect, enabling us to special summon add back Springans Brothers to our hand. Now we will use Springans Brothers effect to attach itself to Springans Merrymaker. Springans Merrymaker will then detach Springans Brothers. So you saw there how we didn't actually need to add this back to our hand, which is why this could have been Pedor. But we will then detach this to special summon Time Thief Winder. Time Thief Winder's effect, second effect, will then activate, allowing us to add a Time Thief card from our deck to our hand. And here we will actually add Time Thief Adjuster, not Retrograde. And you'll see here momentarily. So now we will overlay these 2 quickly for Time Thief Redoer to get out of way of hopefully a tiny bit of Nibiru immunity, as this will be our 1, 2, 3, 4th summon. Now we will normal summon Time Thief Adjuster. That will send a Time Thief card from, as we have not utilized our normal summon yet. We will send Bezel Ship to the graveyard. Now Bezel Ship will be in the graveyard. It will activate its effect to detach a material. And it's very important here that we detach Springans Rockey from this, so that we don't have to, activate Reader's effect and remove its banishing effect. So activate Springans Rockey to special summon our Bezel Ship to the field. Now we will overlay Bezel Ship and Adjuster into whatever rank 4 you want, but generally I would suggest Time Thief Perpetua. And now in the graveyard we will activate Springans Rockey's effect to attach itself to Springans Merrymaker, because recall we only use Springans Brothers effect to attach itself to Merrymaker earlier in the turn. Now we will use Springans Perpetua's effect to attach a Time Thief card from our deck to Time Thief Redoer. So we will get our Time Thief Retrograde attached here to Time Thief Redoer, giving it that nice removal effect. And then, say in the standby phase of our opponent's turn, we can use its quick effect again to attach another Time Thief card to Springans Merrymaker. like, for example, really anything, but in this case, this is another reason why we play the Chronocorder, because it is, your next best target to attach. And so now, on their turn, we will be able to attach a card from their deck to the Redoer. It could be anything. But we will have this removal effect, this, standard sent to the graveyard of that fusion monster effect. We will also be able to detach a card and get out a Time Thief. And we will have, although note with Perpetua's effect, I don't believe you can't use the detach unless there's actually a Time Thief card in your graveyard. So you would have to activate this first and then this, or this first and then this to have a Time Thief card in your graveyard. But that's perfectly fine. So you can get out something like Bezel Ship to attach another card from your opponent's graveyard. So say you activated Merrymaker, you sent these two to the graveyard. So now you have the Chronocorder in your graveyard. Now you will be able to activate Time Thief Perpetua's effect, removing Bezel Ship. To then, you can get Bezel Ship back. You can then tribute Bezel Ship to find any card in your opponent's graveyard and attach it to Time Thief Redoer. So, this board is way more powerful than the last one. We get really good advantage out of this. These are 3 very commonly accessible cards in your deck. So hopefully we're getting at something a bit more on the power level that we want to be seeing here. Alright, let's get into our final combo. So for this combo, we will need 1 copy of the field spell, 1 copy of the dog, and 1 copy of Springans Watch. So we will start off this combo by normal summoning the dog, and then we will immediately activate the dog's effect to tribute it in order to get our main 2 Time Thief monsters, Time Thief Winder and Time Thief Adjuster. Defense position. Since they both arrive on the field at the same time, we'll be able to choose the order in which they activate. We will choose Winder to activate first, so Chainlink 1, Chainlink 2. Chainlink 2 resolves first, sending Bezel Ship. Then we will add our Time Thief Retrograde via Chainlink 1's resolution, so Time Thief Winder will add to our hand. Now with this, we will immediately make Time Thief Redoer in order to get some immunity to a potential Nibiru. Now we will go into Great Sand Sea Golgonda, and then activate Springans Watch, which will now have its second effect enabled due to the Great Sand Sea being on the field. That will allow us to add 1 Springans monster to our hand. We will add Springans Brothers to our hand, and then send Springans Rockey to the graveyard. Now we will activate Golgonda's effect, enabling us to send Brothers away in order to special summon a Springans XZ's monster from the extra deck. So we will send Brothers in order to special summon Merrymaker. Now, Merrymaker will trigger at the same time as Brothers, so it doesn't matter which order we do this in, but say this is Chainlink 1, so Brothers will activate Chainlink 2, resolve, special summon Rockey. Now Springans Merrymaker will resolve, allowing us to send the Springans monster to the graveyard. We'll choose Captain Sargas. Now, Rockey's effect will resolve on the new Chainlink, enabling us to add Brothers back to our hand. Now we will go ahead and activate Bezel Ship's effect, detaching one of our Time Thief monsters in order to special summon itself out. Now we will overlay these two into our good friend Time Thief Perpetua. Time Thief Perpetua will use its effect in order to attach a Time Thief card to Time Thief Reader, and we will choose specifically the second copy of Time Thief Retrograde, so that it has that nice trap material on it. Now we will use Spriggan, the Captain's effect, in order to attach itself to the Merrymaker. And now we will set our Time Thief Retrograde, and that will end our turn. So for this last combo, we'll extend a little further to show what could happen on the opponent's turn and then on the following turn. So, say on the opponent's turn, during the standby phase, we will activate Time Thief Reader's effect, enabling us to attach a card from their deck. So it'll just be a blank card. We don't know what it is. We will then activate Time Thief Perpetua's quick effect to attach a Time Thief monster from our deck to Springans Merrymaker, getting it to that 2 material breakpoint, and we will attach Time Thief Chronocorder. Now, we will be able to go ahead and activate Time Thief Perpetua's second effect during the standby phase, detaching a time material, and since we have a Time Thief monster in our graveyard, we can do this. We will detach Bezel Ship to special summon out Bezel Ship, and now Bezel Ship will be able to tribute itself in order to attach something nice to Reader. Maybe a spell, but maybe not. So, during the opponent's turn, we can expect, if they have at least a half-decent deck, that we will be able to resolve, at least save our Merrymaker due to its self-banishing effect, and our Reader. So, and then we have these blockages in the way as well as Reader. So 1, 2, and then stoppage here. So we have like 3 blockages and 2 interruptions. So, say we have these guys destroyed and sent to the graveyard, or activated. And then we banish these 2 on the opponent's turn. You know. So we'll go to their graveyard. And then this guy's banished as well. Alright, so now what this means is that we will activate Merrymaker's effect to send Springans the Iron Dash Dragon to the graveyard. So during the end phase, assuming we live, which it seems like we will given our interruptions and other monsters blocking the way, we will get Merrymaker back to the field, we will get Reader back to the field, and we'll activate Springans the Iron Dash Dragon's effect, enabling us to special summon a Springan monster from our deck. And we will choose our 4th Springan name, Springans Pedor. Now, Pedor, on our turn, so we can draw for turn, but say it's just another blank card, it doesn't matter what it is. It won't be used here. We will now immediately go ahead, and we have the situation where Springans Merrymaker is on the fields, but we want to make another Springans Xyz monster with Great Sandsea Gold Golgonda's effect. So what we'll do is go into Utopic Draco Future by making Utopic Future, and then making Utopic Draco Future. Now we no longer have that pesky Springans Merrymaker on the board, enabling us to use Great Sandsea Gold Golgonda's effect, which will enable us to discard Springans Brothers, and that will get us out of our graveyard Springans Rockey, which will once again trigger, enabling us to add Springans Brothers back to our hand again. And now this will get us, don't forget, we did all this to get a Springans Xyz monster like Springans Ship Explorer. Now we can also make another Xyz monster with this, like, for example, we could make Time Thief Reader again. Or if we wanted to get our materials off a little bit quicker, we can make something else, like, say, for example, our Abyss Dweller or our Tornado Dragon. But for the example of this, let's just go with Reader again. So we'll make our second Reader. And now we have a really threatening board. We have Brothers in our hand to do it all again the next turn. We have Utopic Draco Future, an Explorer, which we can attach our Springans Captain Sargas to power up to 3100. And we can really do some damage to the opponent. And note that this is an OTK if they don't have any monsters on their side of the field. So this is 3,000, 31, and 24, which equals 85. So this is full OTK if they don't have anything blocking us. So this is a really strong board that we've generated and can consistently generate on our second turn. And note, once again, if this gets through an attack, or any of these get through an attack, we can go ahead and make our good friend Double A Zeus out of Time Thief Reader. So that just about concludes this combo. I hope that all the combos were educational and gives you some idea of what this deck is capable of. Now, I'd like to talk about all the other cards that could not make it into the deck profile. In other words, all the cards that we choose to exclude in place of the cards we did want. Now, I think this is a very important topic because whenever you're choosing a card to go into your deck, you are literally choosing a 1 out of 10,000. There are 10,000 other cards that you neglect for that deck spot. And it's important to consider the other cards that might have other attributes that would be beneficial in your deck, just not quite as beneficial in as many cases. So going through this, I'm going to try and go roughly in the order that they would have gone in the deck. So for example, I'll start with the Time Thief cards, then move on to Springans, etc. With that being said, let's talk about Time Thief Startup, Time Thief Flyback, and Time Thief Double Barrel. Now, Time Thief Startup is a good card. I think it's an excellent card in a Time Thief heavy deck that almost ensures that you will have a Time Thief card in your hand. However, if you don't have a Time Thief card in your hand, this card is almost worse than dead, as you cannot even get it into the graveyard and it sits in your hand like a rock. And in this deck in which we are combining two archetypes, Time Thief Startup just doesn't make the cut in my opinion. Time Thief Flyback is similar in my eyes to Time Thief Retrograde, in that both attach a card from effectively your opponent's graveyard to your Time Thief Xyz monster, hopefully Time Thief Reader. However, I believe Time Thief Retrograde's negation effect is far better than the ability to attach a card from your deck to your Time Thief Xyz monster. This is for two separate reasons. First, Time Thief cards in your deck are kept at a minimum because you have the Springans package, and we really don't want to play too many spells or traps, meaning that this Time Thief Flyback will simply clog up your deck and require you to clog up your deck even more with more Time Thief spell and trap cards. In addition, the effect to attach a card from your deck and the effect to attach a card from your opponent's graveyard kind of can conflict with one another if you start stacking too many of the same type of material on top of it. For example, if you have 3 trap card materials on Time Thief Reader, you can't actually detach 3 trap cards in one turn. You can only detach 1 at a time, so you can get stuck with excess of the same type of resource. Note, these 2 cards are very good in a Time Thief heavy deck, and if there was ever a Time Thief pure deck that was strong, these 2 cards would surely be good in it. Now on to Time Thief Double Barrel. This card is actually just straight awful. I don't know what they were thinking making this card with Time Thief Reader in the game, as it has virtually no advantages over Time Thief Reader. First of all, it doesn't attach its own materials, unlike Reader, so that's already a negative. Secondly, you can only detach the materials when an opponent activates a card or effect, so it's unbelievable that you can't even use its one proactive ability, its attack gain ability, on your turn necessarily, because your opponent has to activate a card and effects for you to activate it. Third, the effects it has aren't even better than Reader's, so it boggles the mind how this card is in the game when Reader is. So you cannot play Double Barrel in my opinion. It's a cardinal sin. Even in a Time Thief deck, I think Double Barrel is awful. Now onto the Springans cards. Springans Brockga is a good card, and it's the one Time Thief monster we choose to leave out of the main deck. However, there's several reasons I choose to leave it out. Number 1 is a level 8 monster, and I believe this card, while good in a deck that is oriented around rank 8 plays, really doesn't fit when you're playing with Time Thieves and making your rank 4 plays. Secondly, we really want to see those level 4 monsters in our hand so that we can make rank 4 plays with our Springans Brothers. So, say for example, you have the field spell, you have, say, a Springans Pedor, and then you have Springans Brockga in your hand. You would rather see that Springans Brockga be another Pedor, because what you can do is play the field spell, activate it discarding Pedor, then summon your Merrymaker, send Brothers to the graveyard, Brothers will special summon back Pedor, so now you have a rank 4 and the level 4 on your field, and now if you have Bronga in your hand, you can't normal summon it. So, whereas if you had the Pedor, you could normal summon and make another rank 4 monster. So this is just a very unfortunate situation where, while it is good in the very late game, you know, its unique effect is good to get yourself a Springans Watch, it just simply doesn't matter at that point, because you can't, because once you have your engine running and have more than 2 or 3 Spriggan names in your graveyard, you're perfectly fine. You don't need to power up anymore. The problem is getting started in this deck, and so Springans Bronga just risks you bricking even more than usual. So this is why I don't play this card. If you were playing a more rank 8 focused build, this card would be very good, but as we're not, it just doesn't fit in this build. Sprigans trap cards. So the Sprigans trap cards are not necessarily bad, but compared to the staples you can play in their place, like hand traps, torrential tribute, and things like that, they just really don't cut the mustard. So the main problem that I have with them is that they make bad hands worse. And what I mean by that is that they don't work on their own, and they pretty much all require you to have Sprigans XZ monsters on the field, or they're low impact enough that they really don't matter. So let's start with Sprigans Blast. Sprigans Blast is a pretty decent card in that it allows you to negate a monster effect without even targeting. However, why not just play Infinite Impermanence or Effect Failure if you want this kind of effect? Those are able to be played on your first turn, or your opponent's turn if you're going second. So like, if you're playing Sprigans Blast and your opponent's going first, Sprigans Blast will be going literally 2 turns after you could have activated your effect failure. So in my eyes, Sprigans Blast is really not very good when you compare them directly to those kind of cards. Sprigans Call has a Call of the Haunted-like effect that allows you to then special summon a Spriggan from your deck in a future turn, assuming that you use Spring the Iron Dash Dragon as the target that you attach and then detach. However, this is just too slow. No one plays Call of the Haunted for good reason, and that special summon on a turn after is just way too slow and way too late, especially given that this is a trap card. Not to mention that this also requires that you play additional copies of the fusion monster in an already tight extra deck. Spriggan's Interlude is an interesting card, and at best it looks like a recurring negation, which is something this deck would like, kind of similar to what Spriggan's Booty is able to do. However, this card requires you to return a Spriggan to the extra deck, which really stinks. If this card only required you to have a Spriggan's Xyz monster, I think this card would be pretty strong and maybe worth playing, but to be honest, at its best, it's like a once per turn Herald of Ultimateness that effectively costs a Spriggan's monster from your hand next turn to regain your original advantage. So it's like, it's not good enough in my ideas and in my eyes. And once again, if you don't draw into your Spriggan's engine, this card is absolutely worthless. Basically, to sum it up, these trap cards aren't that impactful, and the only way they'd be viable is in a much more pure Spriggan's build. And we'll find that a lot of these Spriggan's cards that I talk about here aren't included because they are more intended for a pure Spriggan build. Next, let's talk about the Supreme Sovereign Serpent of Golgonda. So, this card is pretty good at just getting itself out for free, and on paper it looks really good. You know, a level 8 that gets itself out for free as a free 3k beat stick that protects your field spell is a good card in theory. However, once again, this makes your bad hands worse, because if you don't draw the field spell, this card is absolutely worthless and sinks like a brick to the bottom of the ocean in your hand. In addition, this card doesn't necessarily extend your engine or plays. So maybe if you were playing a rank 8 build, it would, but in this build, it just kind of sits on your field and doesn't do anything. So this card, while good, I think, if you had a lot more ways to find the field spell consistently, just doesn't really work in this deck. So moving on, one idea I had at one point was to include a Machina package in the deck. Now I thought that, with the ability to make Gear Gigant X very easily, you could also include a Machina Unclaspbar and a Machina Fortress. And the idea would be you'd make Gear Gigant X, you'd add that Unclaspbar to your hand, which would special summon itself immediately, then allowing you to send the Fortress to the graveyard. And that would allow you to extend into more rank 4 plays. However, this proved a little too clunky in the deck, as the send off of Unclaspbar wasn't actually that useful, and it turned out that this deck actually consistently allows you to get even numbers of level 4 monsters onto your field to make the appropriate rank 4 plays, and not leave out stray Rockies or Time Thief Winders or things like that. And unfortunately with Unclaspbar, it was oftentimes an odd man out, and you didn't actually have a way to extend beyond Unclaspbar consistently. I think the Machina engine in general would actually be an interesting idea that I've tried, but in the future it could be interesting to do in a more rank 8 focused deck, as there's a lot of Machina cards that get themselves out for free as level 8 monsters. But in this particular deck with Time Thieves, you just can't play a Machina engine in my opinion. Next, let's talk about Monster Reborn. So Monster Reborn, everyone knows what Monster Reborn does. It's a great card to play in most decks. However, for a going first deck, it just doesn't seem to make sense, especially here, and let me elaborate. So the targets you would get off of Monster Reborn are things that already recur themselves, like your Springans monsters that attach themselves, or your Time Thieves that also can special summon themselves from the graveyard. If you were thinking about Monster Reborning certain XYZ monsters, they inherently are debuffed, as they don't have any materials when they enter the field. This also isn't to mention that you can't actually special summon your Springans XYZ monsters from the graveyard if they were summoned via Great Sandsea Gold Golgonda, as they weren't XYZ summoned the proper way. So this card once again makes your bad hands worse, as it can be a brick in your hand if you can't actually get your engine running and going. Next, a card that's been seen in a lot of these Springans decks is Machine Duplication. Now, Machine Duplication, in theory, looks like a good card. You can expand on your Springans Brothers, your Springans Pedor, or your Springans Brockey, all of which have lower than 500 attack. However, this card is a real brick in a lot of hands, and just doesn't work in, actually the majority of hands. You could at most have 9 copies of those cards in your deck, and it just doesn't seem to work. And plus, it doesn't actually extend your engine, because if you normal summon, say, Springans Pedor, then you activate Machine Duplication, you get 2 more Pedors, but yeah, you can make a rank 4 and maybe another rank 4, which is pretty good, but your Springans engine doesn't get going because you still have only 1 Springans name on your field. So Machine Duplication, the risk just isn't worth the reward. Instant Fusion is a good card, and in theory, this card should be played in almost every deck that wants to extend with certain level 5 or beneath monsters. However, in this deck, we really care about getting our engines running, not just extending, and there are better extenders like the Phantom Knights of Shade Brigandine and Time Thief Winder that not only enable you to get basically a free level 4 on the field, but actually do more than that. So the capstone, or the reason finally that kind of puts this card in the dirt, is that this extra deck is really tight, and we really don't want to have to include a random level 4 fusion monster just for instant fusion. Harpy's Feather Duster, or Twin Twisters, both of which in my mind serve a similar purpose, are good cards, and oftentimes you don't necessarily care about a discard fodder, as your Springans might just go to the graveyard anyways. If they were going to be attached to an XYZ monster, it doesn't matter if they were going to go to the graveyard. However, you already have capability to remove back row via Tornado Dragon or Springans Explorer, and so I feel that because a lot of decks don't even play Spell or Trap cards in back row, these cards make much more sense as side deck cards. They are useful to get out of things like Skill Drain, which this deck absolutely cannot play under, but they just seem like side deck cards to me. Solemn Strike and Solemn Judgment are good cards, and they can feel really good to open up turn 1 if you have a good hand already. And there's complete merit to putting them in the deck. I think replacing the Torrential Tributes with them is virtually as good. However, I just think that while they are good, the Torrential Tribute can sometimes be a little bit more impactful, which is why I include it. But these are perfectly acceptable cards to include. Evenly Matched is a card I played around with for a long time, and I think this is an extremely strong going second card that has a lot of good theory behind it. The theory being that you can actually make your opponent banish more cards than they would have normally by banishing your own monsters, like your Springans Xyz monsters and your Time Thief Reader, or effectively, banishing an extra 1 or 2 cards. However, this card is a going second card, really. And since this deck wants to go first, I don't think you should really be putting any going second cards in a deck that wants to go first. So this is a side deck card for me. Nibiru is very similar to Evenly Matched. Nibiru the Primal Being is a super strong going second against combo, as it can shut down your opponent's plays, and it can also be dodged by your Time Thief Reader and Springans Xyz monsters, just like Evenly Matched or Torrential Tribute. So while it's a good card and there's good theory behind why it would be good, once again, I feel that a going second card that's good against a certain kind of deck is a card that you shouldn't be playing in a going first deck. Ash Blossom and Joy Spring, or other hand traps, are of course great cards. Just like Solemn Judgment or Solemn Strike, these cards are great, and they could be definitely played instead of some of your PSY package or your Torrential Tributes if you wanted to. However, whenever I make decks, I really like my cards to have some specific reason why they're being played synergistically, as opposed to just, these are good cards. And so, frankly, the Zombie Girl hand traps just don't have the natural synergy with the deck that cards like Torrential Tribute or even the Nibiru or Evenly Matched do. So I just feel that they're a little too low impact. Called by the Grave is a good card, and I definitely think there is merit to running this card in this deck. Of course, you're going first deck and you hate to get hand trapped. Your Time Thief Regulator attracts hand traps like no other, like we've already discussed. However, it can make your hands a little cloggy, and it just doesn't have that super upside like PSY-Framegear Gamma does. So we don't include it in the deck, but you definitely could find space for it if you wanted to. And I think this card definitely has merit. A future card I want to talk about is Crossout Designator. This card, coming in the 2021 Megatins, potentially has the ability to really change the meta and be found in a lot of decks. And I could see it being good for this deck, as you could have the ability to slide in a bunch of hand traps, one-ofs, and then play this card at 3, and it will help ensure your combos go through. However, this deck really likes to keep its deck space at a minimum because you need to draw into your 2-card combos. So playing a bunch of Crossout Designator, well, not necessarily bricks because they're good cards, but Crossout Designator plus its additional cards you must play with it doesn't really work as well in this deck as it does in a lot of others. Moving on to more extra deck cards, Dingirsu is a great card in the deck, and it's an additional rank 8 play that you can play at times. However, in this particular build in which we really cut out the rank 8s, you can't play it because you don't have enough rank 8s to make it. And I found that when I was playing Springans Brockga in my in previous builds, even then I would never make this card. Like, really would never ever make this card. Also, its unique effect of being able to send non-targeted, which is something desperately needed by many decks, is actually rather common in this deck with your Time Thief Reader and your Double A Zeus. So it's really not that necessary. Gear Gigant X is a great rank 4 monster that in theory looks really good for the deck. It's made out of 2 machines, which your Springans are, and it's a searcher for the deck that can allow you to get another Brigandine to your hand. However, I found that this card, while being a good proactive card just like Tornado Dragon or Abyss Dweller can be, just doesn't necessarily do enough on a usual basis. Like, by the point that you can make Gear Gigant X, you would generally want to be pushing for game, and you don't want to just be powering up more Sprigans resources in your hand. So this card just doesn't really work super well. But I would say if there was another like 2 or 3 spots in the extra deck, or if you really wanted to, you could definitely play this card. A card that in theory I thought would be good was Barricade Borg Blocker, in that it could recycle the field spell, which the deck relies heavily on. However, I found quickly that not only is this card just seemingly not that great, but the Springans Rockey effectively already does this, so it wasn't necessary. Ujinki Ahashima is a card that's surprisingly strong in the deck. Now, at the cost of a card in your hand, effectively, you can mimic a Tornado Dragon effect. So while this card is on the field, so basically, you know, you can read it as discard a card as long as this card stays on the field. Whenever you activate your XZ's monsters, an XZ monsters effect, destroy a spell or trap card. So it looks really good in theory, and I think this is another card that if you had an extra 1 or 2 spots, you'd put in. But I found that, you know, this card already does cost a card in your hand, which, you know, if you think about it, could become something like an Explorer. Like, if you're discarding a Sprigans level 4 monster in order to make this card work, that could become an Explorer. And would you rather have an Explorer or a Bujinki Ahashima? Like, this also has the problem that it leaves you open to OTKs, as this card is a prime just card to get run over by certain monsters. And there's no way to get rid of it because it can't be used as link material or anything like that. Next is Infinitrack Megaclops. So this card would be one of your big boss monsters and requires a massive cost of 3 XZ's monsters, which this deck can make. But this is a bit of a win more card, and if you compare the boards that you can make with similar resources, in my opinion, those boards are just better. So if you're going to kill someone, this card isn't optimal, and you should have instead had Borrelsword Dragon in your deck and just made that. If you can't kill the person, and you need to go into the next turn, wouldn't you rather be sitting on something more like Explorer, Redoer, and a 4 material Zeus? So, in my mind, this card, just, you have to ask yourself, what are you trying to get out of it? If you're trying to get it out as well, you can't get your Sprigans Explorer back because it wasn't XZ summoned properly. Your Zeus would only have 1 material, and if you were able to get Utopic Draco back, which would be your best target to get back with this kind of card, you wouldn't, like, the amount of XD's monsters you would have had to go to get to that point would have been at least 5. So that just seems like way too many, and if you got to that point, you probably should have already won the game. The last card I want to talk about is Borrelsword Dragon, which is another card that I've plopped in and out of the deck, replacing PSY-Frame Lord Lambda and vice versa. The reason being that one main weakness of this deck is giant untargetable boss monsters. So this includes things like Raid Raptor Ultimate Falcon or Blackwing Full Armor Master. In that, while this deck is great at getting over things that can't be destroyed, it's not very good at beating over cards, as the maximum attack you can make in this deck without any kind of out-of-deck influence is 3100 attack on your Sprigans Explorer attached with a Sprigans Captain Sargas. This card basically allows you to beat over things. This also helps to OTK your opponent, which this deck also struggles with. This deck is really bad at OTKing your opponent via any of its tools, as none of its tools have that explosive attack boost. However, the problem with this card is that there's not a really efficient way to get it out. You know, if you go into your PSY-Frame Lord Lambda and then get it out and then can kind of extend into it, it's okay, but oftentimes to get this card out, you want to make a link, at least one link 2, and then get its effect, and then make it into something else. And in this deck, it's a little bit tricky to use your Link 2 and then 2 other monsters. So while it's good, it's definitely good, it just doesn't quite fit in this deck. But you could definitely include it if you want to, and I highly recommend trying it out. With that being said, that's the end of these cards, and just like Borrelsword Dragon, I recommend trying out all these cards. I think all these cards I mentioned are up to, well, except Time Thief Double Barrel, are up to your personal preference to add in or not. You know, that's the great thing about Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that you can play it however you want to play it. If you want to play even Time Thief Double Barrel, you can play it in this deck, and it'll have a purpose. It might not be as useful as Time Thief Reader 99% of the time, but that 1% of the time, I'm sure it'll be great. So, in conclusion, I really recommend trying these cards out and finding your own personal playstyle. With that being said, let's wrap it up and move on to the conclusion of the video. So to conclude, this deck is a real blast to play, and has a rewarding but fair playstyle that makes every game feel different. Aside from a few cards, the deck is also very budget, and will be getting even cheaper in the future. At its maximum, it's only $125, and with budget options like taking out PSY-Frame Lord Lambda for Bujinki Ahashima, Utopic Future Draco for Infinidrake Megaclops, and AA Zeus for Evilsworn Exciton Knight, it can cost only $60. Lastly, it's pretty easy to see how additional Spriggan names in the future will make this deck better. For example, a Spriggan monster that adds the field spell to your hand. I hope you enjoyed this deck breakdown, and feel free to leave any recommendations or comments down below. Thanks!